It was Halloween morning 2010 in Ottawa County, Ohio. The air was cool and the streets were quiet. 16-year-old Devon Griffin had just returned home from church. Devon lived in a 2-story farmhouse on County Road with his mother, Susan Liske, his stepfather, William Bill Liske, and his older brother, Derek. The house sat back from the road, surrounded by fields and trees, the kind of quiet rural property where life moved slowly. When Devon pushed open the front door, everything seemed still. He noticed the silence immediately. No sound from the TV, no movement upstairs. He thought maybe his family was still asleep. He went to his room to play video games. Around 1 p.m. he noticed the house was still quiet, so he decided to check on his parents. He stepped into their bedroom, and what he saw stopped him in his tracks. Lying in the bed were Bill and Susan, covered in blood. At first, Devon thought it was some kind of Halloween prank. The sheets were soaked, the pillows stained dark red, and both bodies were motionless. Then he saw the wounds, deep, violent, impossible to mistake. When police arrived, they found the horror extended beyond the master bedroom. In another room, Devon's brother Derek lay dead as well. 3 members of the Liske family murdered in their own home. The killer hadn't broken in. There were no signs of forced entry. The murderer must have been someone they knew. The day before, Saturday, October 30th, Bill and his son, 24-year-old BJ, spent the day hunting near the family's cabin in Carroll County, roughly 2 hours from their home. They returned later that evening, tired but in good spirits. Bill called his neighbour Mark Gradle to come over and celebrate because BJ had hunted a deer that day. Mark joined them in the pole shed beside the house. The 3 men drank beers, laughed, and talked late into the night. It was the kind of easy, quiet evening that made Bill happiest: family, hunting, and good company. Sometime around midnight, the small gathering wound down. Mark said goodnight and he headed home, and Bill and BJ went inside the house. Inside the house, Derek was already home for the night. Devon, however, was spending the weekend with his father, just a few miles away. The next morning, Halloween, Devon left his dad's house around 10 a.m. to quickly stop home and change into his choir clothes before a church concert. He ran inside, got dressed, and left again without noticing anything out of place. He came back home around 11:15, went straight upstairs to his room, and started playing video games. The house was quiet, but this wasn't unusual on a Sunday. A couple of hours later, around 1 p.m, the phone rang. It was his Aunt Laurie. She sounded uneasy. She told Devon she'd been trying to reach Derek and Susan all morning, but no one was answering. Derek was supposed to help his uncle with some work that day, something he never missed. He was reliable and responsible, the kind of person who always showed up when he said he would. But that day, he didn't. Devon paused the game, stepped into the hallway, and called out for his mum and Bill. No answer. Devon made his way to their bedroom and noticed the door was still closed. He pushed it open and saw them lying in bed. At first, it looked like they were asleep, but something felt wrong. His parents were early risers. They'd never still be in bed in the middle of the afternoon. He tried to wake his mum, but she didn't move. Then he saw her face, bruised, darkened, lifeless. When he pulled the blanket back, the sight of blood was everywhere. For a split second, his mind tried to protect him. Maybe this was a Halloween prank, he thought. But that idea vanished as quickly as it came. He knew this was real. Panicking, Devon grabbed his phone and called his Aunt Laurie back. He could barely get the words out as he told her what he'd found. Laurie immediately called 911 and raced over to the house. When police arrived, they found a brutal scene. Bill and Susan Liske were still in their bed, both shot multiple times. Blood spattered the walls, but there was no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds. It looked like they'd been killed in their sleep. Officers searched the rest of the house to make sure no one else was inside. Upstairs, they found a locked bedroom door. When they forced it open, they discovered Devon's brother, 23-year-old Derek, lying in bed. He'd been bludgeoned to death, likely with a hammer. His skull had been shattered by multiple blows, and he was still curled up in the fetal position, another sign he'd been asleep when attacked. The scene was chaotic, but strangely contained. Nothing appeared stolen. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows or damaged doors. Investigators immediately suspected someone close to the family. The sheer violence suggested deep personal rage. A be on the lookout was issued for Bill's pickup truck, a Ford F-150, which was missing from the property. Outside, police searched the house hoping to find discarded evidence. Near a small pond behind the house, they spotted muddy footprints leading out onto the dock. It looked like someone had walked out there and possibly thrown something into the water, maybe the gun, maybe the hammer. The pond was drained, and divers combed through the thick mud at the bottom, but they found nothing. Meanwhile, other officers canvassed the neighborhood. Neighbors Mark and Michelle Gradle told police that around 6:30 that morning, they heard 3 loud bangs. They thought it was odd, but assumed it was someone target shooting in the area. Now it seemed those noises were the gunshots that had killed Bill and Susan. Because the murders happened on Halloween morning, police couldn't ignore the timing. For a brief moment, they wondered if there was a ritualistic or cult connection, but after finding no evidence to support that, they ruled it out. With no weapon, no footprints leading away from the scene, and no forced entry, detectives were left with one big question: who could have done this, and why? At this point, the only person who'd been inside the house that day was 16-year-old Devon. He'd discovered the bodies, but police needed to be sure his story held up. Devon told them he'd stayed at his dad's house the night before and left around 10 that morning to change clothes before his church choir performance. When he went inside, everything seemed normal. He didn't hear anything unusual, didn't see any signs of a struggle. He just changed his clothes and left again for church. When he got back home around 11:15, he went straight to his room to play video games. He didn't go looking for his family until about 1:30, when his aunt called asking if he'd seen them. That's when he made the horrifying discovery. Detectives found that detail strange, that a teenager could be in the house for almost 2 hours without checking on anyone else, especially on a Sunday morning when the house was so quiet. It wasn't proof of guilt, but it was enough to make them pause. They pressed him harder. Where had he been the night before? Was there anyone who could confirm it? Well, Devon's father told police that his son had been with him all night. They'd stayed up late playing video games, gone to bed around 11, and Devon left around 9 or 10 the next morning. Members of the church also confirmed seeing him at choir practice. The timeline checked out. Devon couldn't have been the killer, not with gunshots being heard at 6:30 a.m. Still, detectives asked him to walk them through his morning again. That's when Devon remembered something. When he'd stopped by the house to change clothes around 10 that morning, his older stepbrother BJ had been outside. He was loading some things into Bill's white Ford F-150. BJ had asked what Devon was doing there and how long he'd be home. Devon said he was just changing for church and would soon be gone. When Devon returned after church, BJ and the truck were both gone. Police tried calling BJ's phone, but it was switched off. They sent officers to his mother's home and his aunt's house, both about 15 miles away, but he wasn't there. Then they remembered the Liske family's hunting cabin, a secluded property in Carroll County, roughly 2 hours away. The Liske family were all well liked in their community. Bill was a US Air Force veteran who had a son, BJ, from his previous marriage. Susan was described as a loving mother with 2 sons from her previous marriage, Derek and Devon. In 2001, Bill and Susan married and blended their families together, moving into Bill's rural farmhouse. While Devon and Derek seemed to adjust to this new family life, BJ struggled to adapt. He was used to having the run of the place, and now there were rules, simple things like going to school, keeping a curfew, and showing respect. Susan tried to set structure, but BJ resisted. Neighbors told police they'd often heard shouting coming from the Liske house. Sometimes Bill's friend and next-door neighbor Mark would come over to help calm things down. Mark later described BJ as troubled but not evil, someone who could be polite one moment and explosive the next. There were police calls over the years, arguments that got out of control, threats that frightened Susan. At 16 years old, BJ had been placed on house arrest. One night, when Bill called for help because his son was threatening to hurt himself, BJ lashed out at responding officers. He was charged with assaulting a peace officer. 2 years later, the violence escalated. In 2004, BJ attacked Susan, hitting her hard in the chest. Just months later, he struck her again, this time with a coffee cup, and stole her car keys. He was charged with felonious assault and kidnapping, but was later found incompetent to stand trial. After that, BJ was moved into a group home in Sandusky, where he lived during the week and stayed with his family on weekends. Even then, the tension never really eased. During one visit, he got into a physical fight with his father. By 2007, BJ had been hospitalized and diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, a serious mental illness combining symptoms of schizophrenia and mood disorders. He was prescribed medication, but he didn't always take it. Eventually, Bill made the heartbreaking decision to ask his son to move out permanently after BJ tried to attack Susan while she was in the shower. From that point on, BJ's presence at the house was limited. He'd sometimes come by to help with hunting trips or outdoor work, but there was always an edge, a feeling that things could turn bad at any moment. By late afternoon on Halloween 2010, police in Carroll County were on alert. Word had gone out statewide to be on the lookout for the F-150 pickup belonging to Bill, possibly being driven by his son BJ, and he was considered armed and dangerous. Deputy Michael Balash was patrolling near the Liske family's hunting cabin when he spotted something, a white truck parked in the driveway of a secluded property surrounded by thick woods, and the plates matched. He radioed for backup, then slowly approached. The cabin was quiet, the truck was cold, but there were signs someone had been there recently, cigarette butts near the steps, and a faint smell of smoke in the air. Then, the front door opened. BJ stepped outside, a cigarette between his fingers. He looked calm, almost detached, as if unaware that half the state was looking for him. Balash drew his weapon and shouted for BJ to get on the ground. BJ complied without argument, lying face down on the porch as the deputy moved in to cuff him, and then backup arrived minutes later. BJ was silent during the arrest, offering no resistance, no explanation, and the deputy would later recall that his demeanour was flat, like he didn't fully understand what was happening. When asked how long he'd been at the cabin, BJ said about 3 hours, then refused to answer any further questions, but officers noticed brown and reddish stains on his socks and shoes. The property and truck were both searched. Inside the pickup truck, investigators found several bloodstains, along with a .22 caliber rifle consistent with the weapon used to kill Bill and Susan. Back at the family home, forensic teams were still combing through the bedrooms when they discovered something else. A hammer hidden under a safe in a closet. It was caked in dried blood, and testing would later confirm that it was the weapon used to bludgeon Derek to death. BJ was taken into custody and charged with 1 count of murder, with additional charges pending. That same night, investigators met to review what they had. The rifle, the hammer, the footprints by the pond, the timeline, all of it pointed to BJ. The next day, November 1st, tragedy struck the Liske family again. Bill's sister Susan, who lived just 15 minutes away, died in a sudden fire at her home. Detectives briefly feared that BJ might be connected, but the fire was later ruled accidental. Devon explained that his aunt had been smoking in the garage, unaware that gas had been left on. The cigarette hadn't been fully put out, causing the fire. On November 2nd, BJ appeared in court, where he was ordered to be held on a $1 million bond. Investigators believed BJ had first killed Derek with the hammer before shooting his father 5 times in the head and Susan 3 times. Evidence also indicated Susan may have been sexually assaulted around the time of her death. In the months following the killings, BJ's biological mother, Lynn, continued to visit him in jail. She'd lost her ex-husband, but BJ was still her child. Friends later said she was tormented by guilt, trapped between grief and denial. Susan's relatives, on the other hand, wanted the harshest punishment possible. Her sister Laurie told reporters, "He didn't just take their lives, he took ours too." BJ's case moved slowly through the courts. His attorneys initially pushed for an insanity defense, arguing that his long history of mental illness meant he couldn't fully grasp the consequences of his actions. Psychiatrists disagreed. While BJ clearly suffered from schizoaffective disorder, experts determined he was aware what he'd done was wrong. That distinction, understanding right from wrong, meant he could be held legally responsible. By early 2011, the name William B.J. Liske had become infamous across Ottawa County. The Halloween murders had shattered the sense of small-town safety, and many locals struggled to comprehend how one family could be destroyed from within. The farmhouse where the murders took place was eventually sold and torn down. Neighbours said they were glad to see it gone, a physical reminder of something they'd all rather forget. Detective Jeff Hickman later reflected, "It's the kind of case that never leaves you. You see the pictures, you remember that kid finding his family, and it just sticks." Meanwhile, Devon Griffin, the surviving son, tried to rebuild his life. Friends described him as quiet and withdrawn. He had been the one to find the bodies, a trauma that would stay with him forever. When he later testified, he told the court he still couldn't step foot in the house. "I can't unsee it," he said. "It's just always there." The clearest admission came in a recorded phone call between BJ and his mother. When she asked how he could do such a thing, BJ replied that he wasn't in his right mind. Soon after, he changed his plea to guilty. DNA results later confirmed that the blood on his clothes belonged to Bill, Susan, and Derek. Footprints found near the house also matched his shoes. In August 2011, BJ Liske officially pleaded guilty to 3 counts of aggravated murder. In exchange, prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty and recommended life in prison without parole. At the sentencing, family members spoke through tears, struggling to understand how their lives had been destroyed. When BJ was given a chance to speak, he expressed remorse, saying, "I loved my dad very much, and it makes me sick every time I think about what I did. I can't really explain why this happened, but I think most of all it had to do with my mental illness." Judge Bruce Winters sentenced BJ to life in prison without parole, and he said, "The court cannot make this whole or bring back your loved ones. It can only hope to do justice." On March 15, 2015, 5 years after the murders, BJ Liske was found dead in his cell from self-inflicted injuries. He was just 29 years old. His attorney later said, "He was a disturbed man and facing life without parole. It doesn't surprise me. He likely would have been better off in a mental health facility than a prison." 3 lives were lost in one night, and a 4th destroyed by the act itself. BJ Liske wasn't a stranger, a drifter, or a serial killer. He was family. The people he killed were the same ones who had tried again and again to help him. BJ once said, in a rare moment of clarity, that he didn't mean for it to happen like that. Maybe he believed it, but the truth is, it did happen like that, and nothing could ever change it. Years later, Devon reflected on his stepbrother's actions, saying, "BJ wasn't a monster. We tried our hardest to help him. We just didn't understand how to help him the way he needed." Devon eventually got married, and he and his wife named their son Derek in memory of his brother.